Captain Han wiped the sweat from his brow as he adjusted the Earth Defense Force ship's controls. Another routine patrol near Andromeda Outpost, the same boring route he'd flown dozens of times before. The vastness of space stretched before him, beautiful but lonely. He tapped his fingers against the console, humming an old song his grandfather had taught him. The sudden blaring of the distress beacon jolted him from his daydream. Han sat up straight, scanning the emergency frequencies. This is Stellar Union Research Vessel 7A, under attack and life support failing. The transmission crackled with static, the feminine voice breaking up between bursts of interference. Han's training kicked in immediately. He punched the coordinates into his navigation system and pushed the thrusters to maximum. Protocol stated he should call for backup and wait. Relations with the Stellar Union were tense at best. But something in that voice made him choose differently. He found the damaged vessel drifting near an asteroid field, its sleek silver hull punctured in multiple places. 3 smaller ships, unmistakably raiders, circled it like vultures. They scattered as soon as his military-grade weapon systems locked onto them. "This is Captain Han of the Earth Defense Force. I'm responding to your distress call. Can you dock?" No response, only more static. Han maneuvered closer, his ship's scanners picking up a single life sign. Fading. He would have to board manually, a direct violation of at least 6 different protocols. "Looks like I'm breaking some rules today," he muttered, securing his helmet and checking his sidearm. The space between the 2 ships was treacherous. Han used his suit thrusters carefully, crossing the void with practiced precision. The damaged airlock required him to override it manually, his gloved fingers working quickly as his oxygen gauge ticked downward. Inside, emergency lights cast an eerie red glow across twisted metal. The temperature was dropping rapidly as life support failed. Han moved carefully through the wreckage, following his scanner toward the faint life sign. He found her in the research lab, pinned beneath a collapsed support beam. Her skin had a faint blue undertone that marked her as Stellar Union, with delicate features currently twisted in pain. She was clearly a civilian. Her simple gray uniform bore scientific insignia, not military markings. "Hey there," Han said, kneeling beside her. "I'm here to help." Her eyes fluttered open, strikingly bright against her blue-tinged skin. Recognition, then fear flashed across her face. "Human," she whispered, trying to move away despite her injuries. "Yes, but the friendly kind," Han replied with a small smile. "I'm Captain Han, and we need to get you out of here before your ship decides to become one with the cosmos." As if to emphasize his point, the vessel groaned around them, metal shrieking against metal. "Why would you help me?" she asked, confusion clear in her voice. "Questions later, rescue now." Han carefully lifted the beam trapping her, muscles straining against the weight. "Can you move?" She tried to stand but collapsed with a cry of pain. Her leg was clearly broken, a dark purple bruise spreading across her calf. Han checked his oxygen. Levels. 15 minutes left. The ship shuddered again, more violently this time. "Sorry about this," he said, and in one swift movement, lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, her body tense against his. "My research," she protested weakly, gesturing toward a small console. Han hesitated, then reached over with one hand, yanking out what looked like a data core. He stuffed it into his suit pocket and adjusted his grip on her. "Name?" he asked as he carefully navigated back toward the airlock. "Nari," she answered, her voice growing fainter. "Stay with me, Nari," Han said firmly. "Tell me about your research. What makes it worth dying for?" Her eyes focused on his face inside the helmet. "Peace," she whispered. It could bring peace. The journey back to Han's ship was a blur of careful movements and constant checks to ensure Nari remained conscious. By the time he sealed his own airlock, alarm bells were ringing throughout her abandoned vessel. They watched from his viewport as the Stellar Union ship's reactor finally gave out, the explosion briefly illuminating the darkness of space. Han settled Nari in his small medical bay, administering emergency first aid as she drifted in and out of consciousness. The standard-issue translator sometimes struggled with her accent, but he understood enough. When she finally regained full consciousness hours later, her luminescent eyes widened with shock. She was aboard a human military vessel being treated by a human soldier, everything she had been taught to fear. "Why?" she asked simply, watching as Han changed the bandage on her leg. Han shrugged. "Someone needed help. I was there." He handed her a hydration pack. "Human 101. We're simple like that sometimes." "The Stellar Union teaches that humans are dangerous isolationists," Nari said cautiously, accepting the drink. "That you would sooner shoot than speak." Han laughed. "And what does the Earth Defense Force teach us about your people? That you're arrogant, secretive, and think you're better than everyone else." He sat on the edge of her bed. "Maybe we've all been listening to the wrong people." A small smile touched Nari's lips, the first Han had seen. "Perhaps," she agreed. Outside the viewport, stars streaked by as the ship drifted, two beings from different worlds suddenly finding themselves dependent on one another, neither yet realizing how this chance encounter would change everything. The soft beeping of the ship's navigation system was the only sound in the small cockpit as Han plotted their course. He glanced over his shoulder at Nari, who sat awkwardly in the co-pilot's seat, her injured leg propped up on a storage container. "We're still 3 days from the nearest neutral trading post," Han said, breaking the silence. "My regular patrol route is too close to Earth defense checkpoints. They'd scan the ship and—" He left the rest unsaid. Nari nodded, understanding perfectly. A Stellar Union scientist aboard an Earth defense vessel would raise too many questions. "They would think I'm a prisoner or a spy." "Something like that," Han agreed. He switched to manual controls as they approached an asteroid belt. "So we're taking the scenic route." Nari watched his hands move confidently across the controls. "You're very skilled," she observed. "How long have you been a pilot?" "Since I was old enough to reach the controls," Han said with a small smile. "My father taught me on old atmospheric skimmers before I ever touched a starship." The conversation died again. Two people from worlds that had been Cold War enemies for generations didn't exactly have small talk prepared. A sharp alarm cut through the silence. Han's eyes darted to the scanner. "Raiders," he muttered. "Probably the same ones who attacked your ship. They must have tracked the debris field." Nari leaned forward despite her pain, studying the scanner. "There's a moon around that gas giant. The metallic content in its surface would confuse their tracking systems." Han raised an eyebrow. "You seem to know a lot about Raider technology." "I've studied all spacefaring species in this sector," she replied simply. "It's my job to understand how different technologies interact." Han altered their course toward the moon. "Well, Professor, any other bright ideas? Because my little patrol ship isn't exactly built for extended combat." Nari hesitated, then reached for the console. "May I?" Han nodded, watching carefully as her 6-fingered hands moved across his ship's interface. To his surprise, she accessed systems he didn't even know were available. "What are you doing?" he asked, not bothering to hide his amazement as new data streams appeared on his display. "Your ship's communication array can be reconfigured to emit a pulse that mimics a military squadron's signature," she explained. "Raiders avoid large military groups." "That's not in any manual I've ever read," Han said, watching the Raider's ship suddenly change course on the scanner, moving away from them. Nari's lips curved in a slight smile. "The Stellar Union has been studying Earth defense technology for some time. Your ships are—" She paused, searching for the right word. "Interesting." "Interesting," Han repeated with a short laugh. "That's diplomatic." The immediate danger passed, but Han kept them on course to the moon as a precaution. As they circled into its shadow, he finally relaxed enough to properly look at his unexpected passenger. "You need real medical attention," he said, noticing how she winced with each small movement. "My first aid skills only go so far." "I'll manage," she insisted. "But I should check the settings on that signal we're broadcasting. It won't fool. Their systems forever. Han helped her stand, supporting her weight as they moved to the ship's small communications array. The closeness felt strange. Her skin was cooler than a human's, and she smelled faintly of something like cinnamon. They worked side by side for hours, Nari showing Han shortcuts and modifications to his systems while he provided tools and support. Despite their differences, they developed a rhythm, anticipating each other's needs with growing ease. "Why is a scientist so good with military communications?" Han finally asked as they took a break, sharing the ship's simple rations in the tiny galley. Nari looked down at her food. "My research requires understanding how different species communicate, or fail to. Like humans and the Stellar Union." She nodded. "Exactly like that." "And what have you learned about us?" Han asked, genuinely curious. Nari studied him before answering. "That everything I was taught might be wrong." She absently rubbed her injured leg. "No Stellar Union citizen would have risked themselves for a human stranger. Yet you did exactly that for me." Han shrugged uncomfortably. "Don't go thinking all humans are heroes. We've got plenty of jerks too." "As do we," Nari admitted. "The raiders who attacked my ship? Some were Stellar Union outcasts." The conversation was interrupted by another alarm, this one from the engine room. "What now?" Han muttered, limping toward the sound. The engine compartment was filling with smoke. A coolant line ruptured from their earlier evasive maneuvers. Han grabbed an emergency kit and began repairs, but the smoke was thickening. "Hand me the sealant," he called to Nari, who had followed him despite her injury. She passed him tools as he worked, learning human engineering terminology on the fly. When the smoke made Han cough uncontrollably, she pulled him back and took over, her more slender fingers able to reach the damaged connection. "Your respiratory system is more vulnerable than mine," she explained, her voice muffled as she worked. "This smoke would damage your lungs before affecting me." Han watched, impressed, as she completed the repair he'd been struggling with. "Is there anything you can't do?" Nari settled back, exhaustion evident on her face. "I can't go home again," she said quietly. "Not after this." The weight of her words hung in the air between them. Han realized she had risked everything by helping him, by simply being with him. To her people, she would be seen as contaminated at best, a traitor at worst. "We'll figure something out," he said, helping her back to the cockpit. "I'm pretty good at making up plans as I go." "Is that the official Earth defense strategy?" she asked, a hint of teasing in her voice. "Absolutely. Right after shoot first, ask questions when convenient," Han replied with a grin. As they settled back into their seats, the tension between them had shifted. They were no longer just a human and a Stellar Union scientist forced together by circumstance. They were two people facing a dangerous situation, each with skills the other needed to survive. The reluctant alliance was becoming something else, something neither of them had words for yet. The asteroid field stretched before them like a maze of floating mountains. Han's hands gripped the controls tightly as he navigated through the narrowing gaps, each massive rock threatening to end their journey permanently. "We should be safe here for a few days," he said, finally powering down the main engines after finding a relatively stable pocket within the field. "Patrol routes don't come through here, and raiders consider it too risky." Nari nodded, relief visible on her face. Her leg was healing, but the constant movement and stress had taken a toll. "How long until we can continue to the neutral station?" "The patrol schedules I memorized show heavy activity in this sector." "For the next 3 days," Han explained, stretching his tired muscles. "After that, we'll have a clear shot. 3 days trapped in a ship barely bigger than a shuttle." The reality of their situation settled over them like a heavy blanket. Han broke the awkward silence first. "Hungry? I've got standard rations. Nothing fancy, but they'll keep you alive." "Thank you," Nari said politely, though her expression, when she bit into the dense protein bar, made Han laugh. "That bad, huh?" "It's..." She searched for a diplomatic word. "Different from our food, let me guess." "Your rations probably taste like actual food?" Han asked, taking a bite of his own bar without flinching. Years in the service had deadened his taste buds to the military's idea of nutrition. We focus on sensory harmony, Nari explained. Taste, smell, texture, all must complement each other. She looked curiously at Han. What foods do you enjoy when not eating these substances? The simple question opened a floodgate. Han found himself describing his grandmother's kimchi stew, the street food from his hometown. The first time, he'd tasted real coffee after months on synthetic substitutes. Nari listened intently, asking questions about ingredients and preparation that Han had never considered. Food connects us to home, she observed softly. To memory. What about you? Han asked. What do Stellar Union scientists eat when they're not being rescued by handsome pilots? Nari smiled at his self-description but didn't challenge it. We cultivate living foods that respond to their environment. Some change flavor based on music played during their growth cycle. You're making that up, Han said, eyes wide. I'm not, she insisted, laughing at his expression. I could show you if we ever. She trailed off, the reality of their situation reasserting itself. The awkwardness returned briefly, but curiosity proved stronger than discomfort. Tell me about Earth, Nari said as Han checked her bandages. Real Earth, not what's in our educational materials. Han thought for a moment. It's loud, he finally said, and crowded, and completely beautiful. Oceans that stretch forever, mountains that make you feel tiny, cities that never sleep. His hands moved carefully around her injury, gentler than she expected from a soldier. We're taught that humans damage their planet beyond repair, Nari said cautiously. Han nodded, not offended by the statement. We did for a long time, then we almost lost it completely. His eyes took on a distant look. There's nothing like almost losing your home to make you fight for it. The restoration projects have been going for 3 generations now. He finished with her bandage and moved to the small viewport, gesturing for her to join him. Outside, the asteroid spun slowly, occasionally catching light from the distant sun and sparkling like massive diamonds. What about your world? He asked as she stood beside him. What's it really like? Nari's expression softened with memory. Harmonious. Our cities are built to complement the natural landscape, not dominate it. We value silence as much as sound. She glanced at him. You would probably find it boring. I doubt that, Han said sincerely. They stayed by the viewport, trading stories as the hours passed. Han taught her about Korean poetry, reciting verses his grandfather had insisted he memorize as a child. Nari explained the mathematical harmonies that formed the basis of her people's communication, showing him patterns with her hands that corresponded to complex emotions words couldn't capture. Their conversation flowed more easily now, punctuated by laughter and the occasional companionable silence. Han found himself watching her animated expressions as she described her research, struck by how similar her passion was to human scientists he'd transported. You don't look well, Nari observed suddenly, noticing Han's flushed face and the way he kept clearing his throat. Just tired, he dismissed, though he felt increasingly lightheaded. Nari reached out, placing her cool palm against his forehead. You're burning up, she said, concern evident in her voice. When did this start? Han tried to remember. After the engine repair, maybe? That coolant has some nasty stuff in it. Nari helped him to the small sleeping quarters, her own injury forgotten as his condition rapidly deteriorated. Your respiratory system was affected by the smoke, she said, her mind racing through possibilities. And the coolant compounds would be toxic to your biology. Han's breathing became more labored. Medical kit, he gasped, pointing weakly to a cabinet. Should have antibiotic injectors. Nari retrieved the kit, examining its contents with careful precision. These won't work, she said after studying the medications. The toxin is too specific. Han's eyes were starting to glaze. Over. Great, he managed. Survived raiders just to get killed by engine fumes. No, Nari said firmly. She moved to her salvaged belongings, pulling out a small case. My medical supplies were designed for me, but I can modify them. Her hands worked quickly, combining substances with practiced efficiency. How do you know it won't kill me faster? Han asked, watching her work through increasingly unfocused eyes. Because I've studied human physiology extensively, she replied, not looking up from her work. It's why I was near your patrol route in the first place. Hours melted together as Han drifted in and out of consciousness. He was vaguely aware of Nari's constant presence, her cool hands checking his pulse, her voice urging him to drink strange-tasting liquids, the gentle pressure of monitors being attached to his chest and arms. He woke fully to find her slumped in the chair beside him, her head resting on the edge of his bed, finally overcome by exhaustion. The ship's chronometer showed 30 hours had passed. The burning in his lungs had subsided, and his head felt clear again. Han reached out tentatively, his hand hovering over hers, before gently making contact. Her skin was cooler than a human's, but the gesture of connection was unmistakably the same across their species. Nari stirred at his touch, her luminescent eyes blinking open. Relief washed over her face when she saw him alert. The treatment worked, she said, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. You stayed awake this whole time? Han asked, genuinely moved. Your condition required constant monitoring, she said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world to risk exhaustion for someone she barely knew, someone her people considered an enemy. Thank you, Han said, squeezing her hand, gently. That's twice now I owe you my life. Something shifted between them in that moment, a connection neither species had protocols to address. Nari didn't withdraw her hand from his, and Han found himself studying the differences in their fingers, the way hers had an extra joint that allowed for more precision. We make a good team, he said finally, a smile touching his lips. Even if we're supposed to be on opposite sides. Perhaps sides are just what we've been told to see, Nari replied softly, instead of what's actually there. Outside their small ship, the asteroids continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the boundaries and conflicts of the beings who traveled among them, indifferent, too, to the unlikely connection forming between two people from worlds that had forgotten how to understand each other. The neutral trading station appeared on their view screen like a giant metal flower blooming in the blackness of space, its petals formed by docking bays extending from a central hub. Han felt a mix of relief and unease as he guided their ship toward it. After days in the cramped patrol vessel, they should have been eager for open space and fresh supplies. Instead, a strange tension filled the cockpit. Last chance to change. The plan, Han said, glancing at Nari. We could try for the outer colonies instead. Nari shook her head. This station has a Stellar Union diplomatic office. If anyone can verify my research and grant me asylum, it's them. She adjusted the simple Earth-style clothes Han had given her to help her blend in. The bruises on her face had faded to a pale lavender, making her appear less obviously alien at a distance. Han nodded, though something in his gut told him to turn the ship around. I'll escort you to their office, then head to the Earth Defense Outpost to file my report. The lie came easily, though he knew he wouldn't be filing any report that mentioned Nari. Station Control granted them docking permission without question. Han's military code still worked, which he found both reassuring and concerning. If his codes were valid, it meant he hadn't been reported missing yet. It also meant the system didn't know he was harboring a Stellar Union scientist. The docking procedure went smoothly, and soon they were walking through the bustling main concourse of the station. Han kept close to Nari, one hand hovering near his sidearm, the other occasionally steadying her as she navigated the crowded space on her healing leg. Your people certainly know how to fill a room, Nari observed quietly, overwhelmed by the noise and movement. Humans dominated this sector of the station, their loud conversations and quick movements a stark contrast to the measured interactions she was accustomed to. We get nervous in empty spaces, Han replied with a small smile. Come on. The diplomatic sector is this way. They made their way through the crowd, Han's uniform earning them respectful distance from most station dwellers. As they approached a quieter corridor leading to the administrative sections, Han noticed a group of Earth defense officers studying a display near the entrance. "Wait," he said, pulling Nari into a small alcove selling exotic fruits. "Something's wrong." The officers were looking at images, security stills that Han recognized from various station entry points. They appeared to be searching for someone. One of the officers turned slightly, revealing the screen more clearly. Han's blood went cold. The images were of him, and a blurry figure that could only be Nari. "We need to go," he whispered, guiding her away from the diplomatic corridor. "Now." "What's happening?" Nari asked, sensing his alarm. "They're looking for us, both of us." Han led her through a service corridor, his mind racing. How had they been identified so quickly? Who had authorized the search? They ducked into a maintenance tunnel, the narrow passage forcing them to move in single file. Han's patrol training took over, guiding them through the less monitored sections of the station. "Captain Han," a voice crackled through his communication implant, the standard issue device all Earth defense personnel carried. "This is Commander Park. We've detected your ship's signature. Report to security immediately." Han didn't respond, instead turning to Nari with grim determination. "We need to find another way off this station." "Why are they searching for you?" Nari asked, confusion and fear evident in her eyes. "You're one of them." "Not anymore, apparently," Han muttered. He led them deeper into the maintenance section, finally stopping in a small junction where several tunnels met. It was cramped but secure for the moment. "Han," Nari said firmly, "what aren't you telling me?" He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "I don't know exactly, but this isn't standard procedure. They shouldn't care about a patrol ship being slightly off course, and they definitely shouldn't have images of us ready for a station-wide search." As if in answer to his confusion, his implant crackled again. "All personnel, be advised that Captain Han is to be detained for questioning regarding stolen military intelligence. The alien accompanying him is believed to be a Stellar Union operative. Both subjects are considered high-priority security risks." Nari's eyes widened. "They think I'm a spy? And you're what? My accomplice?" "Looks that way," Han said grimly, which makes no sense unless he stopped, the pieces suddenly falling into place. "Your research, the data core we salvaged from your ship, what exactly is on it?" Nari hesitated, then reached into her pocket and withdrew the small device. "This contains 3 years of my work, analysis of communication patterns between our species, identification of deliberate mistranslations in official channels, and evidence that certain factions on both sides have been sabotaging peace efforts." "Evidence of sabotage by Earth defense personnel?" Han asked, his voice tight. Nari nodded slowly. "And by Stellar Union officials as well. There are those who profit from keeping our worlds at odds." Han's implant buzzed again. "Captain Han, this is your final warning. Surrender yourself and the alien intelligence asset immediately." The pain in his side came suddenly, a sharp, burning sensation that made him gasp and double over. Nari caught him as he stumbled, helping him sit against the tunnel wall. "What's wrong?" she asked, panic edging into her voice. "Compliance enforcement," Han managed through gritted teeth. "All implants have them. Usually they're only activated for deserters or traitors." The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent his entire career believing in the Earth defense mission, only to be branded a traitor the moment he helped someone who challenged the official narrative. Nari's cool fingers probed gently at his side, where the implant was sending painful pulses through his nervous system. "I can block the signal," she said, determination replacing fear. "But I need tools." Han pointed weakly to a maintenance panel nearby. "Should be an emergency kit in there." As Nari retrieved the kit and began working to disrupt the implant signal, Han found himself watching her with new understanding. "You never told me why you became a scientist," he said, trying to focus on something besides the pain. Nari's hands worked steadily, applying a small device to the area around his implant. "My parents died in a border skirmish when I was young," she said quietly. "I wanted to understand why our peoples fight so we could stop it from happening again." The pain began to recede as her device took effect. blocking the implant's connection to the command network. Han took a deep breath, the relief almost dizzying. "Why did you join the Defense Force?" Nari asked, sitting back to examine her work. "My home was destroyed in the asteroid mining dispute," Han replied, touching the spot where the pain had been. "I was 16. The military offered structure, purpose, a chance to protect others from what happened to me." Their eyes met, recognition flowing between them. They had each chosen different paths from similar tragedies, one seeking understanding, the other protection, both wanting peace. "We need to get this data to people who will use it properly," Han said, nodding toward the core in Nari's hand. "Not your people, not mine. Someone neutral." "The station administrator," Nari suggested. "They answer to the Galactic Commerce Guild, not Earth or the Stellar Union." Han nodded slowly. "Getting to them won't be easy. We'll need a distraction." As they huddled together in the dim maintenance tunnel, plotting their next move, Han felt Nari's hand rest lightly on his chest. He looked down, surprised by the gesture. "In my culture," she explained softly, "this is our deepest sign of trust. It means I place my life in your hands." Han covered her hand with his own, the simple touch bridging worlds of difference. "In mine, we just say I trust you." He smiled slightly. "But I like your way too." Outside their hiding place, alarms began to sound as the station security intensified their search. But in that small, quiet moment, something new had been forged between them, an alliance based not on necessity, but on a shared vision of truth. The station administrator's office buzzed with tension. Security officers from both Earth Defense and the Stellar Union stood on opposite sides of the room, eyes locked on each other with generations of distrust. In the center, Han and Nari sat side by side, shoulders almost touching as the data from Nari's research core projected above the conference table. "These transmission records are troubling," Administrator Quan said, her weathered face giving away nothing as she studied the evidence. A career diplomat who had served on 6 different stations, she had a reputation for absolute neutrality. If accurate, they suggest a coordinated effort to maintain hostilities between your peoples. "Every byte is verifiable," Nari said firmly. "Cross-reference the timestamps with your station's own communication logs. You'll find the pattern." Han nodded in agreement. The mistranslations alone are enough to prove intent. Critical piece, proposals from both sides deliberately mangled to sound threatening. A Stellar Union official stepped forward, his ornate uniform marking him as senior diplomatic staff. "This human has clearly coerced Dr. Nari. Her research was meant for proper channels, not this irregular presentation. Coerced?" Han stood up so quickly his chair toppled backward. "I saved her life when your people abandoned her to raiders." "Stand down, Captain," barked the Earth Defense Commander, a stern woman with sharp eyes. "You've violated at least 15 regulations. You're facing serious charges." Administrator Quan raised her hand, silencing the room. Interesting how quickly both sides moved to discredit these findings rather than address them. Her eyes, shrewd, after decades of watching interspecies politics, narrowed slightly. Almost as if the evidence threatens you personally. The room fell silent. Han and Nari exchanged glances, a small victory in the subtle shift of power. Quan tapped the data display, zooming in on a particular transmission record. This communication originated from this very station 6 months ago, a warning about a human attack fleet that never existed. She looked pointedly at the Stellar Union diplomat. "It bears your authorization code, Ambassador Tech." The diplomat's blue-tinged skin darkened with emotion. "A necessary security measure. And this," Quan continued relentlessly, displaying another record, a falsified report of Stellar Union weapons testing near human colonies. Her gaze shifted to the Earth Defense Commander. "Authorized by your office, Commander Yoon." The next hour unfolded like a carefully orchestrated dance, with Quan systematically presenting the evidence while Nari explained the technical details. Han watched with growing amazement as the administrator skillfully trapped both sides in their own contradictions, never raising her voice yet commanding complete authority. Finally, Quan shut down the display and stood. I am invoking Commerce Guild Protocol 7A. This station is now a neutral mediation ground. All military personnel will stand down or be removed. She looked at Han and Nari. These two individuals are hereby granted diplomatic protection while we verify their evidence. The protests from both delegations were immediate and loud, but Quan simply activated her command bracelet. Station security officers, wearing the neutral gray of guild forces rather than Earth or Stellar Union colors, entered the room. You may each send one representative to observe the verification process, Quan said calmly. The rest of you are dismissed. This is not a request. As the room cleared, leaving only Quan, Han, Nari, and two very unhappy observers, Han finally allowed himself to breathe normally again. They weren't safe, not by a long shot, but they had a chance. You two have created quite the diplomatic incident, Quan said once they were relatively alone. Not us, Nari replied quietly. We just exposed what was already happening. Quan studied them both with newfound interest. A human soldier and a Stellar Union scientist, working together. A hint of amusement touched her lips. If I were the superstitious type, I might call it destiny. The next 3 days passed in a blur of verification processes, secure transmissions to neutral third parties, and increasingly urgent messages from both Earth and the Stellar Union central government. Han and Nari were kept in separate quarters, but allowed to meet under supervision during the data analysis. On the morning of the 4th day, they found themselves summoned back to Quan's office. The administrator looked tired but satisfied. The Guild Council has reviewed the evidence and found it compelling, she said without preamble. They've called for an emergency summit. Representatives from both your governments will be arriving within the week, moderates who have been pushing for improved relations. Han couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. They actually agreed to talk? When faced with evidence of deliberate sabotage reaching to the highest levels, they had little choice, Quan replied. Public opinion would destroy any official who ignored this. Nari looked stunned. My research actually worked, she whispered almost to herself. After all this time, Quan stood, smoothing her formal guild uniform. I have preparations to make. You two have free movement privileges on the station now, though I suggest staying in the neutral sectors. She paused at the door. Oh, and the official record will show that you both acted as envoys of peace during a time of crisis. Your respective charges have been reclassified. When she was gone, Han turned to Nari, a smile slowly spreading across his face. Envoys of peace. I like the sound of that better than traitor. What will you do now? Nari asked, the question hanging heavy between them. Han considered for a moment. I can't go back to the Defense Force, not really. Not after seeing all this. He gestured to the data still displayed on the screens. But I'm pretty good at flying ships and breaking rules when needed. I'm sure there's a place for those skills somewhere. The Peace Initiative will need security personnel, Nari suggested, trying to sound casual. People who understand both worlds. Han's eyes met hers. Are you offering me a job, Doctor? I'm suggesting a partnership, she replied, holding his gaze steadily. Later, they stood together on the observation deck, watching as ships from both fleets approached the station, the first official joint mission in generations. Not a military exercise, but a diplomatic one. The massive vessels moved cautiously around each other, decades of distrust evident in their careful positioning. It won't be easy, Han said quietly, watching the ships. There's too much history. History is just stories we tell ourselves, Nari replied. We can tell new ones. The station hummed around them, its diverse inhabitants going about their lives, most unaware of how close their worlds had come to further conflict, or how significant the approaching ships truly were. Han looked down at their hands, resting on the viewing rail just centimeters apart. Slowly, deliberately, he moved his hand closer until his 5 fingers rested beside her 6. Nari glanced at him, a small smile touching her lips, then carefully intertwined her fingers with his, a perfect misalignment that somehow fit. Of all the wonders I've studied, she said softly, I never expected to find the answer here. Where? Han asked, genuinely curious. Nari looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. In the space between worlds. In connection instead of separation. Outside the viewport, the ships from both fleets finally docked, their airlocks connecting to the station simultaneously. A small, synchronized step toward something new. Han squeezed Nari's hand gently. I'm glad I broke protocol to save you. And I'm glad I trusted a human soldier, she replied, her luminescent eyes reflecting the stars that no longer separated their peoples. Around them, the station continued its endless orbit, one small point of light where different worlds touched, where endings became beginnings and where the space between stars didn't have to mean distance but possibility.